Paris Jackson at 27 has finally confirmed what many long suspected through her unflinching honesty about addiction's lasting scars and her unapologetic truth about who she is. She has what is called a perforated septum, slightly different from a deviated septum, and that is what you think it's from. Don't do drugs, kids. Paris Jackson was 11 when she stood in front of millions and said goodbye to her father. The world watched her cry, but nobody knew what she was really thinking. For 16 years she stayed quiet about one belief that haunted her. Then she said it out loud. She believed her father was murdered. At 27 she also confirmed something about herself that people had whispered about since she was a teenager, something she first admitted at 14 but nobody took seriously. Now there is no more guessing. What she said on January 7, 2025 left no room for doubt. Paris Michael Catherine Jackson was born on April 3, 1998 in Beverly Hills. And from the very start her life carried a kind of mystery that most kids never touch. People close to the family said her first name came from a trip to Paris, France, and her middle name carried an older promise too. Because Michael Jackson, his sister LaToya, and Kathy Hilton had once made a pact that if any of them had a daughter the name would be Paris. Even the timing around her arrival felt unusual because Michael had married Debbie Rowe while the pregnancy was already showing, and it all happened not long after his divorce from Lisa Marie Presley. Paris became the second child in that setup, arriving about 14 months after her brother Prince. Before Paris could even understand the world around her, the adults around her were already shaping it in a very specific way. Debbie Rowe had met Michael years earlier at Dr. Arnold Klein's clinic in Beverly Hills, where she worked as a dermatology nurse and where Michael came often for treatment connected to vitiligo. Over time they became close and Michael shared how badly he wanted children. Debbie offered something that sounds almost unreal when you hear it later, because she told him she would have his kids and the arrangement was built so Michael would have full custody. They did marry, but even with a legal marriage they did not live like a normal couple, and the whole thing stayed more like a plan built around fatherhood than a home built around romance. Then came the moment people still talk about, because Michael described being so eager to bring Paris home that he rushed the process in a way most parents would never dare. In later interviews he talked about taking her home almost immediately. And once they got back to Neverland he took care of the mess himself while a team of nannies was already waiting to help. It paints a clear picture of how much he wanted to be a dad and how he wanted to keep his children close, not just emotionally but physically too, as if being near them was the only way he could breathe normally. As Paris grew, the family structure tightened even more. Michael and Debbie divorced when Paris was still very young, and soon after that Debbie signed away her parental rights through the settlement, which included a large payment and limited supervised visits. In court she even said that Michael was doing well as a father and that she did not want to share parenting. So Paris grew up mostly without her biological mother in her everyday life, and instead she grew up inside Michael's world at Neverland with Prince and later her younger brother, who the public once called Blanket and who was now known as BG. Around them there was always help from nannies and caretakers. But the center of the orbit was still their father, and his idea of safety became the rule. That is where the masks entered the story, and they shaped Paris's childhood in a way that still sounds strange until you understand the reason behind it. Michael kept their faces covered in public so that if they went out without him people would not recognize them. When Paris later looked back on it, she admitted she did not understand it at first and that it confused her, but she also explained why it mattered. It let them go places other kids went, like toy stores and family arcades, without being chased or surrounded. In a world where cameras waited outside every door, those disguises became a kind of freedom. And with time she said she appreciated that freedom because it gave them a chance to do normal things without feeling hunted. Inside the gates of Neverland, life also had rules that made it feel less like a fantasy park and more like a structured home. The estate was massive and it had rides, a small zoo, and even a private cinema. But Paris later said they could not just do whatever they wanted whenever they wanted. They were homeschooled. They had school days like anyone else, and fun had to be earned through good behavior. Still, the most unforgettable moments were the ones that felt warm and sudden, like when Michael would break into the middle of class and decide the day should turn into family time. Those moments mattered because they were simple, and they were the kind of simple childhood moments he felt he lost when he was young. He told them about how his own childhood had been swallowed by studios and rehearsals. So he tried to give them the kind of outings he never had, taking them out for ordinary fun when he could. In that same quiet family space, Paris also shared something personal that showed a softer side of him that the outside world rarely saw clearly. She said that when she was very young, he seemed to notice her feelings and attractions, and instead of making it heavy or scary, he treated it with acceptance. He teased her in a playful way, the same way he teased her brothers, which made it feel normal rather than forbidden. Years later, Paris looked back on that and said she knew how lucky she was because not every child gets that kind of support so early. But even inside a gated world, reality has a way of pushing in. And the breaking point for Neverland came when Michael's legal troubles became public and the ranch was searched by police. Even though he was later acquitted, he said he felt violated by what happened there and he decided he would not return. Staff were dismissed. The place that once felt alive began to empty out. And the dreamlike home started to fade into something quiet and abandoned. For Paris, it meant that a place tied to her happiest memories also became tied to loss because the setting that held her childhood began to disappear piece by piece. After Michael died on June 25, 2009, Paris was only 11 and the ground under her feet changed in a single day. Reports later described the desperate emergency response, and the case ended with his death being ruled a homicide and his doctor being convicted of involuntary manslaughter. What matters most in Paris's story is not the medical details but the fact that she lost the person who shaped her whole world. And she lost him at an age when kids still believe their parents are permanent. When the memorial happened on July 7, 2009, the entire world watched and the scale of it was overwhelming. Millions tuned in. The arena was filled and the ceremony became one of the most watched televised events of its time. Yet the moment people remember most was not a performance or a celebrity speech. It was Paris stepping up near the end, shaking and crying and speaking from pure pain. Producers later said it was not planned, and that is exactly why it hit so hard, because it did not feel like a show. It felt like a child trying to hold on to her dad while the whole world listened. As the years passed, Paris admitted that the pain did not simply go away. In a later interview, she pushed back on the idea that time heals everything. And she explained that you do not erase grief, you learn how to live beside it. She said losing her father reset her sense of what pain is, and that afterward she felt she could handle other hardships because nothing could feel as crushing as that first loss. Even with family around her, stability did not always stay steady. Katherine Jackson became the legal guardian of the children after Michael's death. But in 2012 she disappeared from their home for more than a week and it turned into a public storm. Paris, frightened and confused, posted online because she could not reach her grandmother, and the situation fed rumors and fear until authorities got involved and the courts stepped in. A judge temporarily adjusted the guardianship arrangement while the family argued about what had really happened. And even though Katherine later returned, the whole episode added another layer of uncertainty at an age when Paris was already carrying too much. Not long after that, Paris began rebuilding a connection that had been missing for most of her life. On her 15th birthday in 2013, reports said she spent time with Debbie Rowe quietly and away from cameras. It mattered because it was not a staged reunion. It was a private attempt to create something real. Debbie also reportedly refused to sell the moment for publicity, choosing privacy instead. And that choice helped build trust because it suggested she wanted a relationship more than attention. Still, the teenage years were heavy, and Paris later spoke openly about how dark that period became. She went through severe mental health struggles, including moments of crisis and self-harm. And she said the pressure, grief, and constant public judgment pushed her into a place where she did not feel safe inside her own mind. After a widely reported incident in 2013, she received intensive treatment and was later placed in a residential program for teens where she worked on recovery away from the noise. She also described years of online bullying that made everything worse. And she explained how stepping away from social media for a long time became part of protecting herself. Paris Jackson was only 18 when she suddenly stepped into the spotlight in a way people could not ignore. In February 2017, she landed on the cover of Rolling Stone, photographed by David LaChapelle. And the story hit hard because she did not try to soften anything. She talked about pain that had been sitting inside her for years. She spoke about being sexually assaulted at 14. She spoke about suicide attempts, including one at 15 when she took 20 Motrin pills and cut her wrist. She also said she believed her father was murdered, and she did not hide behind careful words. Even the details from earlier years were raw, like the June 2013 attempt where she cut herself with a meat cleaver after being denied permission to attend a Marilyn Manson concert. By the time that issue came out, she had more than 50 tattoos, many honoring her father, and it felt like she was turning her private scars into a public line in the sand. This was not a simple celebrity moment. It was her saying, "This is who I am and I am still here." That honesty was also the beginning of her modeling era because it changed how people saw her. A month later, on March 2, 2017, she signed with IMG Models, one of the biggest agencies in the world, known for representing names like Gisele Bündchen, Kate Moss and Gigi and Bella Hadid. Paris posted about it on Instagram with gratitude, and IMG introduced her with a photo from a CR fashion book spread shot by Mario Sorrenti. It mattered because it told the industry she was not just a famous last name. She was stepping into a real lane. Even the timing felt like a movie scene because just weeks earlier she had been spotted doing her first editorial shoot in Paris, posing near the Eiffel Tower in January 2017 wearing a sheer white blouse and showing new nipple piercings. It was a loud signal that she was choosing her own image even if people were uncomfortable. As the months moved forward, the covers started to stack up and the work got bigger. In fall 2017, she appeared on ID magazine wearing Calvin Klein shot by Willy Vanderpeer, and she was already learning the messy side of fame because she publicly criticized ID on Twitter in August 2017, saying the intro was not something she approved. Still, she kept going, and the more she showed up, the more the fashion world took her seriously. Later, she appeared on Vogue Hong Kong's December 2021 cover in a sheer Burberry jumpsuit. And then she landed Harper's Bazaar Mexico's September 2024 Icons issue, styled with high fashion labels like Dior and Fendi plus bold Cartier Panther jewelry. The point was clear. She was building a portfolio that stood on its own even when people expected her to stay trapped inside the shadow of her family story. With that momentum, she did not stay only in photos. She walked major runways and proved she could handle the pressure of live fashion too, including Jean-Paul Gaultier's Women's Spring-Summer 2020 Haute Couture show in Paris. At the same time, she started popping up in brand campaigns like Calvin Klein's My Calvin's campaign in February 2018, shot again by Willy Vanderpeer alongside Millie Bobby Brown and Lulu Tenny. She also showed a side of herself that did not care about pleasing the room. When she had concerns about how horses were treated during Dior's 2018 cruise show, she left quickly, choosing animal welfare over staying for the cameras. And years later, in October 2024, she opened Vivienne Tam's Spring-Summer 2025 show under the Alexander III Bridge in Paris, tied to a collection inspired by traditional Lee brocade weaving with UNESCO recognition. Little by little, she was turning into someone who could stand at the front of the line and not just blend in. While the modeling world was opening doors, she was also stepping into acting, and she did it fast. On March 8, 2017, the same month she signed with IMG, she made her first real TV acting appearance on Fox's music drama Star, created by Lee Daniels. She played Rachel Wallace, a stylish and intimidating social media figure who poked at the main characters during a publicity shoot. What made it interesting was that she admitted the role felt opposite to who she really was, and she was nervous because it was her first serious on-camera acting. Still, she leaned into it. She did not wait for confidence to arrive first. She walked in with shaky hands and did it anyway. After that, she tested the film world too. In 2018, she made her feature film debut in Gringo, playing a character named Nellie, surrounded by a heavy cast that included Charlize Theron, David Oyelowo, Joel Edgerton, Amanda Seyfried, Thandai Newton and Charlize Theron. Wait, no, Charlize Theron again, and Charlton Copley. It was not a starring role, and that choice said a lot. She did not demand the spotlight just because she could. She took a smaller part, learned the set, and proved she could work inside a big production without needing the story to revolve around her. Then she took a sharp turn into horror. On June 25, 2019, it was announced that she had joined Scream: Resurrection, the rebooted third season of the franchise, and the date hit with extra emotion because it was exactly 10 years after Michael Jackson's death on June 25, 2009. Publicly, she was stepping into a horror project with a fresh cast and a new storyline. Privately, she was approaching a painful milestone. The season featured names like Mary J. Blige, Keke Palmer, Tyga, and CJ Wallace. And it followed a local football star whose past comes back to haunt him. It was a dark role choice, but it fit the way she was building her career. She was not trying to stay safe. That pattern continued with controversy too. In June 2020, backlash exploded when people learned she was cast as Jesus Christ in the independent film Habit, a movie with an intentionally provocative setup. Petitions spread fast with hundreds of thousands of signatures calling the film offensive, and the noise got so loud that the film struggled to find a US distributor. The storm around it became bigger than the movie itself. But even then, she did not disappear. She kept working. And in 2021, she joined Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk's American Horror Stories, appearing in the premiere episode Rubber Woman. On July 15, 2021, she played Maya, a wealthy high school mean girl who humiliates another girl by exposing private messages and turning it into a public attack. Paris admitted she found the character hard to connect with and emotionally difficult to play, especially because it touched close to her own experiences around sexuality when she was younger. In classic American horror fashion, the story ended brutally with Maya murdered and trapped as a ghost in the famous murder house. Even the way she talked about it showed her mindset. She was a fan. She was excited. And she was not afraid to get killed off if it served the story. At the same time, she was quietly building something else that felt more personal than fashion and acting. In 2018, she stepped out from the noise around her family name and formed an indie folk duo with Gabriel Glenn called the Soundflowers. Their first performance came on June 23, 2018 at Canyon Sessions in Los Angeles, where they played original songs like Daisy and In the Blue. Instead of chasing big pop energy, she sang and played the ukulele. And the choice felt intentional, like she wanted a smaller room and a closer breath. Not long after, she performed at a benefit supporting cancer. And she did it in front of her grandmother Katherine Jackson, which made the moment feel even more personal. Her watermelon-colored hair was part of that same message. She was choosing her own look, her own sound, and her own pace. 2 years after that debut performance, on June 24, 2020, the Soundflowers released their self-titled EP. And the timing felt almost like a perfect circle. But what really shook people was what came with it. Paris and Gabriel released a Facebook Watch docuseries called Unfiltered, Paris Jackson and Gabriel Glenn, and it opened her life in a way most people never expect from someone raised in that level of fame. The series premiered June 30, 2020 and ran with weekly episodes through August 4, 2020. She talked about self-harm, body image anxiety, and the kind of trauma that does not vanish just because the world thinks you should be fine. One episode even included her brother Prince Jackson on set as he produced a music video through his company. And then in the finale, she admitted they were constantly butting heads. On the same day the final episode aired, August 4, 2020, reports broke that they had split after more than 2 years together. So the series did not end with a neat bow. It ended with a crack, which made it feel even more real. Inside that same project, Paris also spoke openly about her sexuality, and the way she explained it made people stop trying to force her into a simple label. She said she had dated more women than men, and she even shared that she had dated a man who had a vagina. Her point was not shock, her point was clarity. She said attraction for her was about the person, not what is in their pants, and not chromosomes either. She also reminded people she had come out when she was 14 and that she had spoken about liking girls even earlier. She described how her father reacted when she was a kid and had a crush on a girl, and she painted it as supportive and playful instead of scary. Still, she also talked about how hard it was with other parts of the family where religion and taboo made the topic feel unsafe. She said there were moments where she felt alone and excluded, but her brothers stood by her, including Prince joining a gay-straight alliance club in high school to better support her. So even in a story full of pressure, she kept pointing to the places where love actually showed up. After the breakup in August 2020, her career pivoted again, and it happened quickly. She signed a solo deal with Republic Records, a major label that represents huge artists, and the move felt like she was stepping into a bigger arena without losing her voice. She said she felt excited and nervous but also grateful, and she highlighted the part that mattered most to her. She did not want to be told what to sing or how to sing it. That one line explains so much about her whole path. Then she released her first solo single, Let Down, on October 29, 2020. The song came with a gothic horror music video that looked like a nightmare dressed up as a party. She attended a masquerade ball, and the story ended with a killer tearing out her beating heart. The track was co-written by Paris and produced by Andy Hull of Manchester Orchestra, a band she said helped her cope after her father died. The video also had heavy names attached behind the scenes, including Eli Roth as executive producer and Meredith Alloway as director, and Paris wore an archival Alexander McQueen piece from spring 2007. The whole release felt like a statement. She was not trying to be cute or easy to market. She was showing a broken heart as something violent and haunting. Just 2 weeks later, on November 13, 2020, she released her debut album Wilted with 11 tracks, again created closely with Andy Hall and engineered by Robert McDowell. The writing happened between January and July 2020 during the pandemic disruption, and the album shot to #1 on the iTunes US Alternative Album chart right after release. Critics described it as indie folk and alternative with its own identity, and Paris leaned into that. She talked about the collaboration like a family bond, calling the band her musical big brothers. It was a new kind of belonging, the kind you choose. Even after that, she kept hinting that she would not stay in one sound forever. In December 2021, she said she was working on new music with a new sound, and later releases showed her shifting again, exploring more edge and grit. At the same time, she kept juggling everything at once: modeling, acting, and music, all running side by side with activism woven through it. She even said she originally pursued modeling to grow her platform and bring more attention to her charity work. So the public career was never only about fame. It was also about reach. Underneath all of those projects, though, there was a private fight that shaped her life more than any runway or camera. In January 2020, she made a decision to get sober from drugs and alcohol, and she described it as the moment she stopped running. She later revealed the kind of addiction she had been trapped in, including heroin and alcohol, and she spoke about how it nearly destroyed her. The damage was not only emotional. She said it left permanent physical harm, including a perforated septum that causes a loud whistling sound when she breathes through her nose. In a November 2025 TikTok video at 27, she showed that damage for the first time and warned people bluntly not to do drugs, saying it ruined her life. It was not a polished speech. It sounded like someone telling the truth because she wished someone had told her sooner. On January 7, 2025, she marked 5 years sober with a video montage posted to Instagram, and she started it with a confession that hit like a punch. She introduced herself as an alcoholic and a heroin addict. She also showed her sobriety chips stacked across milestones from 1 day to 5 months, then 6 months, 11 months, 18 months, and then 1 year, all the way up to 5 years. In her caption, she said gratitude hardly scratched the surface, and she explained what sobriety gave her in plain terms. She could smile. She could make music. She could love her dogs and cat and actually feel it. Then she ended with a simple thank you to God, like she was holding on to the only thing that felt steady. And then, just when people might think recovery means life gets easy, she tore that illusion apart. On January 3, 2026, only days before her 6-year mark, she posted an Instagram reel that was brutally honest. She said getting sober does not mean life is perfect. And she admitted that a few years and things got very hard for what felt like an eternity. Without drugs and alcohol, she had to face feelings she used to numb. And she said she did not have the same survival skills she once relied on. Months earlier, at an event on October 11, 2025, she compared getting sober to getting into a car accident because everything you shoved in the back seat moves forward on impact. That image explains it in a way anyone can feel. You do not only stop, you also have to clean up what comes flying at you. In that January 2026 post, she also shared the names of the battles she was still living with, calling out treatment-resistant major depressive disorder complex, PTSD, and OCD. She did not try to sound inspirational. She sounded tired and real. And then she reached outward anyway. She told people they were not alone, and she told them she loved them, because sometimes that is the only thing you can offer when you know what it feels like to be stuck in your own head. Even her family story carried its own turns. After years of distance from her mother Debbie Rowe following Michael Jackson's death in June 2009, they reconnected in 2016 after Debbie's breast cancer diagnosis was made public in July. Reports said Paris reached out quickly, texting "I love you," and she became her mother's steady support through treatment. In October 2016, she posted a photo kissing her mother's bald head during chemo, calling herself a fighter because her mother was a fighter. Then on January 3, 2017, she shared a photo of Debbie holding a chemo done sign celebrating the end of treatment. It was one of those moments that reminds you life is not only about what breaks. It is also about what finds its way back. So when you look at her path from 2017 to now, it does not move in a straight line. And that is exactly why it pulls you in. She shows the truth people usually hide. Then she turns that truth into work. And then she keeps moving even when the world tries to label her, corner her, or turn her pain into gossip. She walks runway steps onto sets, writes music that sounds like a diary, and still finds the strength to say, I am sober, I am struggling, and I am here. That is not a perfect story. That is what makes it impossible to look away, and what makes her confirmation at 27 feel so powerful, the raw, undeniable proof of survival, authenticity, and refusing to let the past define the future completely.